In July, a teenage boy, his mother, and his aunt were found dead in the Colorado Rockies. They apparently tried to survive up in the woods, up in the mountains, and they were woefully unprepared for what happened next. I have a word of warning to those who are at least casually interested in survivalism, homesteading, being a prepper, getting prepared for things. And I know a lot of other channels talk about this as well, talking about getting out and actually practicing the things that you're thinking about doing to prepare and actually do the things at home. And one of the things that comes up on this channel often enough is folks saying, why don't you make more practical videos? Why don't you do gardening videos? Why don't you do a lot of these more practical skills and how-to stuff? And one of the very simple reasons for that is I'm not as good as a lot of these other people that are out there making videos, and they have a hard time gaining views on those videos as it is. For me to go out and make subpar videos, not as good-looking video production quality, as well as I'm not nearly as experienced as people like Pinball or a lot of these other channels out there, Patera. You go out there, talk about Bear Independent. Just a lot of these other people have a lot more experience in different things, and you do well to watch some of them. But what I want to get out is how difficult surviving is. I do have a fair bit of experience in survival. I walked 2,000 miles across the continent of North America on the Appalachian Trail. I've lived out in the woods, lived out of a backpack, and dealt with a lot of situations out in the woods and everything like that. And so I have a bit of a grasp on some of the things, but when it comes to gathering your own food, when it comes to hunting and gathering and collecting and gardening and growing, I don't think a lot of people truly grasp how difficult it is to eke out an existence, how much of a trouble it is to grow your own food while doing all these other things at the same time. And that's one of the things that I think people, they see like gardening and they're like, yeah, I can do that. But they don't take into account that a lot of the people that they watch and a lot of people that they're learning from go to the gardening store and buy stuff, right? If we're talking about a grid down scenario, the further we step away from technology, the more we're going to see that survival is really difficult. If you leave your home, a modern constructed home with insulation, with a lot of things to it that are very, very useful and adaptable, if you walk away from your home, if you walk away from modern conveniences, if you walk away from the tools and equipment that are provided by today's society, survival gets really difficult. And one of the toughest things about survival is that you have so many things that you need to be doing. You need to be getting clean water. You need to be getting food. You need to get food for now, and you need to get food for later. You need to build shelter and worry about heat and cooling, temperature and stuff like that. And you're always dealing with insects, of course, and everything like that, and other pesky crawlers, depending on where you are in the country and in the world. You also have to worry about society, like your social interactions. They don't stop. In fact, in a crisis situation, your social interactions will become more strained and more difficult. You're going to have to deal with just interpersonal stuff. And you're going to have to do that instead of going and getting water. You're going to have to be doing that instead of growing your food or hunting for food. And then comes the whole question of security. If you're having to worry about protecting your stuff and your people from outsiders, that becomes more difficult too. And then hygiene. If your toilet stops working, like, you got to figure that out. You got to go dig a pit toilet. I mean, and you may be having to figure this all out. if you don't know how to do those things, if you're not even sure what direction, you're going to have meetings and conversations and planning about what you're going to do about how we're going to build a toilet and getting everyone on board with the design that you're going to go with. And just, it gets really, really difficult to survive, especially for people who just aren't prepared. People who don't know how to do these things. And you may know how to do all these things, but then you may be surrounded by people who don't. Take this for example. We just don't realize how good we have it right now. The average wage out there that I'm kind of seeing is about like $15 an hour. You know, if you're starting off, maybe you're getting a little less, like $13 an hour or something like that, at least here in the United States. And if you work 8 hours a day for $15, basically to get a rice, beans, and a little bit of cooking oil for a day's food, 2,000 calories, you're looking at about $1 still. You can still get great value 20-pound bags of rice for $11.14 right now. That may go up shortly, but rice, pinto beans, some cooking oil, you can feed a person for 120 days based on how much you make from 1 day's worth of work at a mid-level job, working with a little bit of experience at a Walmart or a McDonald's or something like that. That's 120 days worth of food from 1 day's work. Friend, how many days worth of work will it take to grow 1 day's worth of food if you're just doing your garden? Now, we can all grow lettuce. I mean, that stuff grows like a weed. It's easy to grow things like leafy stuff, but when we start talking about things like peas and beans, and we start talking about grains like wheat or potatoes or corn or these type of things that deer love to get into and other critters like to get into, and you have to deal with all these different problems with fungus and with water and fertilizer and all this kind of stuff like that. When you start looking at that and you start calculating up how many hours worth of work it's going to take to grow a day's worth of food, the numbers start getting a lot more difficult, especially if you don't have the experience, the practice, if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the systems in place already. This becomes very, very difficult. And I just think that a lot of people have this dreamy, hypothetical notion about, oh, well, I'll just go grow our own food. Do you know what that entails? Do you have the systems, the tools? Do you know how much land it's going to take in order to grow that much food for you and your family? And that's why I keep getting back to stockpiling food is easy. Going out with current money in today's society, today's system, and you're paying a farmer who has highly specialized equipment, highly specialized knowledge to grow your food for you, and then you're paying other people to package it in a way that's going to last for quite a while. Now, you might want to repackage it so it lasts even longer. But when we talk about putting together your own food buckets, when we talk about stockpiling food for yourself, 1 day's worth of work for an average worker making about $15 an hour can put away 120 days worth of food. That is an opportunity you have today that if a crisis hits, whether it's a disaster that makes you flee from your home, whether it's civil war or unrest in your country, or whether it's just the power grid coming down, crashing down around us, the entire supply chain falling apart. Whatever it is, that situation may not have you may not have the opportunity to buy food for cheap anymore. It may become very, very difficult to acquire food. And these folks that died up in the mountains, it seems like maybe it was more of a weather thing, but they were all very malnourished. It looked like they got trapped by the snow. Do you know what the weather really looks like in your area? Here in Pittsburgh, it snows, but then it melts. And then it snows again, and then melts, and it snows, melts. Some of you live in places, especially when you look up into the mountains, and you're thinking, well, we're going to go retreat up into the mountains. Well, some of those mountains, they get snow, and they just stay snowed. And if you're up there, you can get trapped by the snow, especially up in the Colorado Rockies and the Rocky Mountains in general. A lot of other mountains that are up a good ways. If you're up there when it snows at the beginning of the season, you may not be leaving like your immediate area, your campsite. You may not be leaving your campsite for the next 6 to 8 months. And that's a situation that a lot of people don't realize and they don't understand. And if you don't understand your environment, things start going badly very quickly. And when it comes to survival, bad choices can compound upon themselves very quickly, and dangerous situations can become deadly very quickly. And if you haven't been on a position where you've experienced that, where things start cascading the wrong way, where your bad decisions or reading about people who've made bad decisions, it's something you need to be so very prepared for. Everything you do, when you're not being protected by modern society, you need to protect yourself. You need to have a lot of margin. You need to have excess reserves. You need to have excess heat. You need to have the old mantra, right? 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Whatever you have that you're going to be dependent upon, you need to have 2 or 3 of them. You need to have backups to backups to backups. Because if your life is depending on these devices or pieces of equipment or tools, you definitely either need to be able to fashion your own, make your own, or you need to have backups. And this is just in any type of survival situation. I'm a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout. And they kept knocking it into our heads. Be prepared. You need to accept the responsibility to be prepared for yourself. When things go wrong, are you prepared for that situation? If you're not prepared for the situation, you can't blame the situation. It's your fault. It's your fault. And that's why we keep talking about so much on this channel about being prepared, stocking up, and getting more things, because in a situation that's difficult and you don't have the opportunity to resupply, you're stuck with what you have. And believe me, having stuff, tools, food, things to heat yourself with, can become super, super critical. Don't be like these people who made some really bad choices out in Colorado. They went up into the mountains, not understanding the mountains, not understanding survival, and they got themselves killed. I don't know if you know this, but the Hollywood actors are still on strike. You probably haven't been impacted by this in any way, shape, or form. Cable TV is out there talking about how cable TV is broken. It just doesn't work anymore because people are watching YouTube and they're watching other things. They're not paying for cable anymore. Boo-hoo, right? Boo-hoo for them. But we have a lot of people in our society that their skills don't exactly correspond directly with survival skills, and you may be one of them. As an accountant, does that really translate into survival skills? It doesn't. It doesn't really. not directly. And people whose skills do not directly translate into survival, you need to be extra careful and extra mindful that you don't get this bookish, dreamy kind of idea of what homesteading or survivalism looks like. Because when it gets down to it, it's painful, it's a lot of work, and it's just mind-numbing, a lot of it. It's rewarding. It's you feel so alive as you're connected to your food, as you're connected to the things that you do. But at the same time, everything becomes so very much more difficult without modern conveniences, without modern tools. So just think that through. Think through, how do you imagine you're going to get through difficult crises to come? And try to have a more realistic understanding of what that will truly entail. If you're going to grab a backpack and you're going to go up into the woods and survive up in the woods, friends, do you really understand what you're talking about? Because I don't care if you have a little book on what kind of greens you're going to be able to eat. You're going to hunt and trap, and it's really difficult, folks. The mountain men of hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they struggled to survive, and they had a lot of advantages that you do not have. They had a lot of skills, a lot of practice, a lot of tools that you don't have today. And the situation is very different. Hundreds of years ago, chestnut trees were everywhere. You could live off just the chestnuts wherever you went. And they did. There just aren't chestnut trees in the United States anymore. So, things to think about, realities to embrace. And that's just a warning for you all. Thanks so much for watching. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.